So somewhere lined up, fly in. Drone view of Lee's Epiphone ES 339, and this guitar has been given the, what's that thing called, wire wool treatment. So it's got a sort of dull satiny look to it, which is okay actually. I mean, it's a little bit incomplete in some ways, but it's functional, and it's a little dulled around the edges, but I quite like it. It's unfussy, and you don't worry too much, although I think it's got some swirls, like it's been done with a mixture of by hand, and somebody's taken a sanding block or a orbital sander to it somewhere along the way. Anyway, so one of these, right, so we've got Epiphone Deluxe, and one of these is a, right, I don't think I've got an Epiphone Deluxe floating about in there. No. Okay, we'll not worry too much about that. But somewhere in here we have got the replacement bridge, which is going to go on here. So we've got replacement bridge, we've got adjustable Tusq nut, we've got stand you up in a corner, if you may. Make sure you're recording. Sorry about that. There we are. I think the number's running. Do you know what? This is a bit dodgy because it's always in the middle. 23, 24, 25. Right, it is running. The way the bracket holds onto the camera always has that slightly hidden. Right, so this is a fairly straightforward proposition. Now what I mean by that is the Epiphone ES 339 seems to be the kind of guitar that really likes a fret level and low action and an adjustable nut. Now it really needs an adjustable nut. Well, there's some screws missing here. It needs an adjustable nut for the simple reason that this is made of plastic and it's horrible. So it does need that. Let's just check, just for fun. Sorry, that wasn't very clever, was it? Boing. Let us check the measurements currently. We're looking at 2 and a little bit, 2.1 versus 2, 2.2 and 2, 2.2 and 2. Okay, so it's quite a bit to go down. So I think in both of these cases, let's get the strings slacked off. Oh, no, I tell you what I didn't check. Let's check the relief. Let's get a note and tune it up. So we'll check the relief, and then we'll change the bridge, the nut at the same time. Don't even want to start trying to tune it up because it's so horrible. Pinging is so bad. Alright, we've got a huge amount of relief here. So we'll do the relief first. So let us remove the one remaining screw on this thing, and we'll get our adjuster Veta in here, and we want to tighten it up, providing it works. Oh, blimey. Aha. Oh. That's quite a bit of adjustment required. That was a way off. Let's have a quick look. Oh wow, different. The reason I suggested to Lee to replace this bridge is because the saddle, the notch or the saddle height on the G-string is way off what it should be, and that just is always an upsetting and ugly thing. So let's be gone with it. Also, having the roller bridge extends your intonation room, which is also good, but it also gives the strings a smoother point of contact, so less likely to break strings. So I always think it's a pretty good replacement option for about 20 quid including postage. You can't go too far wrong. So we'll start off by dropping this new one in. And then we'll knock off the nut off the end here. Now I can do that with a fair amount of confidence because I know that the Epiphone nuts are very well fitted. In other words, they're not locked in by the finish on the end. So they do the finish first. They cut a slot with some sort of router, and then they add the nut afterwards, which is not the case with many of these modern Chinese made guitars. So thankfully the Epiphone does it the right way, which means I can take the nut off like that without any great risk of damage, unlike the Chinese ones or many other types where I have to actually saw the nut off, which is a rat hole pain. So I want a number 3 style bass for these for this Epiphone, because Epiphones have quite a deep nut. I'll just get rid of these little crunchy bits of glue and plastic caught in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the adjustable nut. I'm going to wind its feet in quite a bit, and then I'm just going to sand off the bottom of the feet so that the nut is, the grub screws feet, or the grub screws, are flat, which spreads the load a little bit better on the 3D printed plastic, which just helps to even out the loading a bit. And there we are. A bit more on this side. Job done. So now we're ready to drop the thing into its base. This is a very tight fitting one, so it's okay. In it goes. And we drop it in here, and it's a pretty much, well, I love the Epiphones for this because it is almost a drop in without, almost, I just do a tiny bit of sanding on the front edge. That's pretty much all it will need. So I'll just move this off to one side. And the only reason I'm doing it on the front edge here is because it's a little bit, or the plastic, the 3D printed plastic is a little bit proud. So just being able to take that back smooth makes that fit just that little bit better. I want it absolutely flush like that. And that will fit in there beautifully. I have my friend Gerard to thank for such precision fitting number 3 basses. And we just take a quick check. Now the idea about these nuts is to make sure that the whole thing sits at its lowest point. We've got the strings sitting on the 1st fret. That's where we really want them, and then we'll come upwards from there. Different guitars have different heights of slot, shelf, whatever you want to call it, and the Epiphone just happens to fit really well with this number 3 bass. Okay, that's sitting on the 1st fret, which is where I want it. I tighten up the G and the D first so that they hold the nut in place, get the other two up to tension a little bit. What I should have done is marked the yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take these off again. I'm going to mark the frets, since let's not assume, let us not make an assumption. Let us do this way first. Okay, so with some pressure on and the nut lined up perfectly, first thing we do is we give it some lift off the base, like so, both ends. There we are. Then we'll tune it up. Beautifully smooth to begin with. Now, notice there was no pinging at all from the nut, so that's immediately the Tusq nut has cured all the horrible pinging. Now we've got an even spread of height on our saddle, which we didn't have before, and now I can bring this down to the target low 1.5 millimeters on the base side and about 1.2 on the neck side. Neck side, treble side, base and neck, that's not the right words. It's probably a bit too low now, yes. Under the radar. One and a bit, 1.2, 1.2, yep. Just under 1.5. Now, if I tune this up now, we'll get a sense of how it plays. Lovely. Immediate improvements. Except that's off it. I thought that was a bit misaligned, but that's off its saddle roller. Now the question is, how well yeah, not bad, not bad. Now let's see. I'm impressed. That is pretty good. Good on you, Epiphone. There's a little bit of fret slap and a couple of choky notes down here, but none on the bends so far, which I think it's quite remarkable. So these are a bit old and grimy, so I think we'll go ahead and do a very light level from the point of view of clearing up these frets, re-crowning them because they've been leveled before or worn a little bit flat and not crowned. So we'll do a little bit of light leveling to remove the fret slap, and we'll crown the frets and we'll polish them out so they look and feel as good as new. Hopefully the strings will survive long enough for me to do that. So again, very straightforward, and the nut, as you know, isn't even glued on yet, so but I'm happy with where it is, how it's performing, tuning up stably, beautifully. So we'll get this all marked up, and then obviously once I've leveled and got rid of as much of the fret slap as is possible, then I will clean up the fingerboard as well, and we'll get fresh oil on it. It looks pretty clean generally. It's got a bit of play grime on it, but it isn't bad. Epiphone, in the frets I'm seeing on Epiphones are pretty good these days. Don't know how old this model is exactly, but they seem to be pretty good. This is better than some of the ES339s, but they're all fairly good. Okay, I'm just going to tune it again just to have it as close as possible. Something rattling down here, inside of here. And a little bit of rattle down here as well. But very good. Very close. So this won't be a long drawn out leveling job. It'll be very light, and then we can go into the polishing routine. So the what did I find on the 10th fret and about the 17th 18th fret on the E, there was a problem showing up. So we'll see what the neck tells us about general levelness of this whole thing. Let's see. Start off by calibrating it, as always. Okay, slightly too curved. That'll be right. So because I'm pretty happy with the strings generally, frets generally, and I'm just looking to ease a little bit of fret slap, particularly on the bigger strings, thicker strings, the wound strings, I'm really just going to start with what I hope is a light, gravity driven leveling kiss with this rod. And that sort of usually tells me a little bit about the kind of layout of the neck, what we find. So we've got, I'll stand back if I can, we've got a bit of cutting, no cutting, no cutting. So 3 without, cutting, cutting, cutting quite a bit, none, 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 cutting right at the end. So we've got a dip here, we've got a dip here, and we've got a high spot there. So high, high, and high. So that tells me first of all that the calibration of the truss rod is correct, because it's cutting at points, at some points all the way along. What's missing are the ups and downs, as you can see, and they are That shows you this neck is like this, which is hard to conceive almost. So, you know, it's difficult to imagine that's true, but the tool really does reveal that amazingly well. So what I know about this is it's told me what the shape of the neck is under load with these strings. So I know it's going to be that shape under load every time. Now, do I need all of those frets cut with the sandpaper? No, I don't. I can afford to leave unevenness below the level of the action that I'm aiming for, and because I only need it to be level enough to play at my chosen action. But with this one, I usually push on just a little bit more, and the reason for that is I can afford to in terms of fret metal, and I just want, on this second go, I just want to see if it opens up any of these spaces or whether it's still low. We're starting to cut there, but we've got a low spot still here and here. So it's getting a little bit towards the, or it's starting to bottom out that bumpiness, but it, you know, it tells us it's there, and we now know. And now I know what to expect going across into the next track, or what I call the B track. So again, I keep the same calibration on this one. I'm using the same fairly light touch on the bar at this point. I don't need to put any major pressure on it. And now I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to see, because I already have a sense. We've got high spot here. You can see the dust starting to build up here. High spot in the middle relative to the other high spots, but we've got low, high, fairly wide area of low, but this one's cutting, so that's the one that's come to the top in the middle, and then a high spot at the end. So it's just confirming what I already know. Do I need to continue? Well, let's play it. If it's all playing well and I'm content with that, I don't need to work it until all the metal's cut. Now what's going on here is there's some rattle going on here. I suspect it's inside this body. I can hear things moving around. Yeah. So there's a tiny little bit of a zizz at 12th fret. So I'm going to do a little bit more and sort of focus on there. But I know that everything's playing, just a tiny little bit more attention paid on the 12th fret. And what you might find as you do this is that if the 12th fret is low, and actually the 11th and 12th, remember we said I had a problem with the 11th fret on this side, well that ties in with what I already know. So that one can either be a high fret or a low fret making it buzz, and in fact, because we now know we've got two low frets amongst a bunch of high ones here and a bunch of high ones there, a little couple of low ones still here, we now know these two are low, and that's explaining why this one sounds like that. So it's great, this method. It just confirms what you already know, or what I already know from the outset. I don't think it's the screws or anything in these in the bridge. I think they're pretty taut, this type of bridge. They don't rattle. No, they are. They look to me to be under pressure. So it's something in the wiring inside of here, which we'll worry about afterwards if there's even anything we can do about it. So having done the B track, now it's time to do the G track. Now G track is the one that often is critical, because where the high E bends right up the neck tend to choke out is usually where you bend them across into the G track. So you bend the string across from the E, and it's at the point where it comes into contact with the, I suppose you could call it the G string part of the fret, and you've got to remember you're pushing that E string up the hill to the top of that fret in the middle near what we call the G track, I suppose. and that changes the geometry because the start and end point of the E string are down at the bottom of a three-dimensional hill, and you're pushing the string up the hill, and then it has to go back down to a low point down here, and that's why any high spots in the G track will usually cause the high E bends to choke out further up the neck. Now in this case it isn't doing it, so I'm really just going to be concentrating on the fret slap removal. And fret slap in my world is a distinction I've given to the kind of fret buzz that isn't caused by a single high or low fret. Single highs or low frets are tackled with a fret leveling beam, as you know. Very good. Pretty good. Yeah, individual high or low frets are typically handled by the fret beam when you first start using it. But there is another kind of buzz that I've distinguished or named just to make a distinction. I call it fret slap, and that's where the once you've cleared the uneven frets or the high or low frets, fret slap is caused by, I've discovered, by the remaining general undulation. So you can get rid of the difference between this one and this one, which is a definition of a high fret, but you can still be left generally with the overall up and down bumpy topography. And when you have that topography, it's what prevents the string from spinning cleanly without clipping the frets. Now this kind of fret leveling that I'm doing here, which is to I'm not trying to level individual frets because we haven't really shown up any particularly bad ones. I'm trying to put the ideal curve of this rod onto the bumpy rough curve, if you like, of the actual neck, and in doing so it maps itself or imposes the smooth curve onto this otherwise slightly bumpy topography, and it amazingly reclaims a little bit of room for the strings to move, and it seems to reclaim enough to cure quite a bit of the residual fret slap. One of the ways I know that I've got fret slap is it's a type of buzz that follows all the notes, pretty much either half or three quarters or all the notes going up a single string. So, and that is not characteristic of fret buzz, it's what I call fret slap. Now those notes have cleaned up beautifully. When we find the two frets that are low, it's actually now not so bad, we're starting to bottom it out a little bit, but we know that the 11 and 12 were slightly low. Because there's two of them, it's not one that's been put in wrong and it's sitting high, which sometimes causes a high fret, maybe a bit of grit in the slot. Two low frets, or three low frets like over here, are frets that have been pressed in properly, but they're low because they're in a ditch, or they're either on the sides or in the bottom of a ditch. So that's the interesting thing about the difference between fret buzz and fret slap, my terminology. If you talk to anyone else about that, they won't know what you're talking about. So just remember, it's my way of making a distinction, but it's useful because it makes me think about this process in two separate stages. So when I level frets, I level first once, if you like, or I level in my mind. I'm leveling to get rid of any fret buzz that I have identified, and that's individual high frets, often either found as single high frets that choke out and I can see them standing up and I can see this tool taking them down, or it can be the ones that stand up just high enough so that the bent E string chokes out on the G. So I can take those down, flatten them out, and then after that I'm listening out. I'm putting far less pressure or anything on the truss rod, and because I want it to stay as curved as it can possibly be, which is why I'm using this one, which is quite stiff. I want it to keep its curve, and I want it to map its curve onto the bumpy neck. And the great thing about this is when I do this, I can usually, as long as I give it time and don't press too hard and let it do its mapping of the curve, what I find is that it clears up the fret fret slap that I was hearing before. So the notes get clean. Tiny bit there. Tiny bit there because we expect it. Because they're down a hole, those two. So I'm going to do a sort of a little bit more on the first half of the neck here, up to and including the 12th fret, and then it should be good. And then the real proof of the pudding will be testing this on the low E, because that's where the fret slap was the most pronounced, and it often is the case because the strings move most. They're the slacker, relatively speaking, and they're looser and they move more because they're thicker. So what I'll do is we'll just check this out now. Now we'll go back down or listen on the E. So 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 10, 11, and this one. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 18 are clearly a problem. You hear that? So we're going to calibrate for the low E, and my aim will be to show how this approach, thinking of this as imposing a smooth curve on a bumpy, imperfect curve. I'm going to show you how that clears up the audible fret slap that we just heard. Now we've got a pretty flat neck at the moment because I've set the relief really low, and again that's quite a challenge for a guitar, is to have a low action and a low a flat profile, a flat relief I should say. Okay, so again I'm going to use the same principle, light touch. I'm going to get this to, we know we're working on this chunk here and one at the top here, so kind of focus my attention on the middle really, and I'm just making the beam go backwards and forwards all the way to the end of the frets so that we don't kind of leave any bits out. Okay, well, see, I can see 12 was really high. There's quite 11's low and 12's high by comparison. Look at that. There's a distinct difference. See that? 11 and look at 12 by comparison. So that's what's causing the. Oh, I don't want that up there just yet. That's what's causing the slight fret slap at that part of the neck. So this could even be already enough. So we'll try it out. Tiny little bit at this end, tiny little bit at the far end. So I didn't pay so much attention to either of those, so now I'm going to go back, and what I mean by paying attention is I'm just literally going to hold the rod at that end and just put a fraction more pressure on it just by holding at that end, and then I'm going to do the same up here because I know it's just a little bit slappy at this end, and I'm going to make sure we clear that up too, and any frets that are in the way. And there's a tall one up there, which is what I think is causing the problem. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit magical, a little bit scientific. You heard that fret slap go away. Now that was the magic of this. The same tool, using it with two different mindsets. You could argue doing the same thing, but I do change the way I use it between what I call, I change how I use it depending on what I'm doing. So if I think I'm just removing fret slap, then I do it one way, like you just saw. If I think I'm trying to level out uneven frets, I do it another way. Now this is tied on strings, my least favorite thing in the world. This hook around it isn't necessary, and it not only makes it difficult for guitar techs, but what it does is, because it's tied round and sticking out in all different angles, it's going to scratch. It hugely increases chances of scratching the headstock. It's not so critical on this because it's a wire-wooled finish anyway. But it's just one of those things. When I put the that is not the real McCoy. When I put the new strings on, I'll do it how I normally do it and just put the minimum amount on, and you'll see that without tying it on in any way, we'll cut off any excess, so there's no danger of it spinning around and scratching, because it has this habit of, if there's a curly bit here, it'll always find its way downwards, and that little sharp wasp's sting will do its very, very best to scratch a circle on your headstock if it can help it. Yeah, it's tip down there. Okay, so I'll check the height. This is quite, I just noticed that the stop bar is standing up very tall. I'm not really sure it needs to be that high. It increases the brake angle, but not particularly for any good reason. I'm just going to cut these so we can throw them away easier. So, next step now is to winter. No, autumn's definitely come. I'm just going to check the gauge of these strings. I'm pretty certain they're 9s. I know that's what Lee wants on here. 0, please. I'll put it in millimeters, not millimeters, inches. 10s, huh? That's odd. These could have been hybrid. We're going to put 9s on. The top here is 9. The bottom is trying to tell me it was a 10. So it might have been a hybrid 9 set, but we'll go with 9s, which is what Lee has said. Okay, so yeah, regarding the height, this doesn't have, sorry, it's not too great an angle. It's high up, so it's a reduced brake angle. So we might want to increase it by lowering that a little bit. I'm going to get me a thing, a little brush. Here. I'm just going to move that for a second and just brush off this dust. So the next thing we're going to do is to recrown these frets. So to do that, I'm going to remark the frets, and we're going to go over them with the fret crowning file, a good old long-serving StewMac fret crowning file. A lot of people ask, is it worth the money? I have to say I've never had a bad tool from StewMac, and based on that experience, when it really counts, I'm quite content buying an expensive StewMac tool, even though it can be ridiculously expensive. And this, I think when I bought this, it was £110 or something. It's probably now more like 130. But you know, is it a tool that I recommend? Yes, if you're going to do lots of setups, it sure is. Do you have to have it to crown your frets? No, you don't. You can do this with a three-sided file, like this little thing here, which is, you know, a little bit sort of slower and fiddlier. But actually, technically, if you're careful, it's a little bit more accurate, believe it or not. But this is perfectly good, and as you can see, it's a quicker process because it's a concave file. And I guess you know, although my ebooks show how to do the fret crowning with the three-sided file, and I'd be happy to do it if I had to, if I didn't have this one. I use this one because I do so many setups, and I'm not averse. I'm not a purist. I'm totally not averse to using tools if they save time or make things easier. That's what they're for. So what I'm doing here is, with this concave file, I'm using the concavity on the inside of this to round off any flattened edges on the frets caused by the fret leveling, and this sort of wears them away and works its way inwards, and you can see the metal shining as it's being cut by the diamond bits on the file. And the aim is to stop while you've got a thinnest possible line of black marker pen. And the reason you keep the line of black marker pen is that it tells you you haven't touched the very top of the fret, providing the marker pen's still there. If you overcut it or over crown it and you rub off the black marker pen, you don't know how much material you've taken off, and the chances are you've spoiled your nice even frets. Now you can see I'm taking a long time on these three already, because this was the high spot in the neck, and it's now the thing is, people who haven't leveled frets this way, sometimes they struggle to figure out why I would do it this way, because it looks a bit odd and it's unusual to them. The reason I do it this way is there's two primary reasons. The first is that, as you saw, I can use the fact that strings are on the neck to tell me exactly when I've achieved what I need to achieve, which is to get rid of the fret slap or the uneven frets, the fret buzz. No other method can allow me to do that, and with other methods, you will know if you've done it before, you have to keep going until you've got a perfectly flat situation, no clicks with your fret rocker. But that is an arbitrary flatness, meaning it's sort of perfect flat, mathematically flat. And the point about that is it's more flatter than you need. Remember I said you only need it to be as level as the action you're setting requires. If you leave a little bit of unevenness below that playing action that never comes to the fore because it's beneath the action we've set, then there's no need to take any more fret metal, because you're only taking fret metal off all of the frets to get down to a perfectly level set of frets according to your fret rocker. So that's why I like it. That's the first reason. So I think it's the least amount of fret metal loss to get to the playing action we want. That's the first reason. And then the second reason is, as you can tell, things show up that you wouldn't normally know when the neck's under compression and under load. When it's loaded, it's not only trying to pull upwards a little bit, but it's squashed this way. So it's got various forces acting on it. When you level frets with the neck not off necessarily, but the strings off, and the neck relaxed like this, you're missing the compression and the curvature for starters, right? But it's the compression that makes a difference, that I think causes this to bunch up and sit upwards. And you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see this as a peak. If you look down the neck now, you probably wouldn't see this standing up. If you look down the neck when it was under compression with the strings on and at playing pitch, you would probably start to spot a bit of just a little bit of an unevenness. And that's what I like about this method. Because you play the guitar with the neck under load and the strings at full tension, then it makes sense to level it in that same condition. And of course, you can't do that if you level it in the old method. You can't but have your neck flat and curved and loaded at the same time. You know, flat enough to level it with a flat beam, but curved and loaded enough to don't know what that was, to show up the kind of compressions and the curves and the bumps that we need to expose. So that's why I do it in the loaded, fully strung way. And when I first did it this way, after Hugh introduced me to the tool, he bought the tool called the Katanga. The Katanga, made by Lenny Henry. No, it was not true. It was Katana, made by an Italian fellow. I was skeptical, and I thought, how the hell does that work? Because I couldn't get my head around the idea of a curve leveling a curve. And of course, if you match one curve to another curve, then as far as the two surfaces are concerned, effectively they are flat, because they're the same as each other. Only we three-dimensional people know they're curved, but to them they're just two faces touching perfectly, and however you slide one across the other, because they're both curved, they are like two flat surfaces. So having done it that way, it struck me as absolutely beginnings of a clever way to do it. And then then some strange things happened, and a very grumpy inventor, to whom I'd paid $150 or $130 to buy the tool, and which I was absolutely raving about because it was such a good tool, and I was kind of singing its praises to my subscribers and so on and so forth. But because the maker of the tool took offence at how I had shown the tool on my on my YouTube channel, the fact that I just included it in my videos, showed it in detail, showed myself using it, talked about how I used it and what I liked about it, and how great I thought it was. But he got very upset because he was struggling to patent it or exploit his invention. You know, and to be fair, it was a great tool, and you know, kind of expensive, but I was a convert to the way of doing it, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so having started out as an absolute advocate and a fan, over a period of about a week, this gentleman rapidly made it unpleasant and impossible for me to continue using the tool. And I sort of gave him a bit of feedback on that, saying, look, you know, I know I was very understanding and all the rest of it, saying, look, I know, you know, you've probably struggled to capitalize on it, and I get that the Chinese are ripping things off left, right and centre, but to be fair, you know, I've done nothing but praise this, and you know, I have to say, I did say to this too, you've managed to turn me from an advocate to an enemy within the space of a week, you know, because he was treating me absolutely abysmally in emails, calling me, you know, shouting and yelling at me what I could and couldn't say and show, and how it seemed to me that I quickly became responsible for all his ills and troubles in developing this product. And I thought I was kind of just crazy, since I was such an obvious fan, and I, you know, literally regretted that I'd ever not only ever used it, but I regretted that I'd ever made a couple of videos specifically to show it off and to tell people to buy it and recommend it and so on. You know, when you go out of your way to help somebody, I won't deny, I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. It was hurtful. So I was hurt, my feelings were hurt, and I said to him, I really don't understand your logic for doing this, because you have turned a glowing ally into an enemy. I'm not going to use your damn thing. Well, no, what did I say? I said, I think I said something like, you honestly, you can't treat your customers like this. And at which point, I remember it well. I sent that email, and it was a bit of a ticking off. But like I said, my feelings were really hurt. So I sent him that email, and there was a kind of ka-ching that eBay or something used to do in those days to tell you had money. And it turned out he refunded the money I'd paid for it. So I was left with this tool and my money back, which I didn't want. I wanted the tool. More than anything, I wanted to use the damn thing and recommend it to everybody, because I thought it was great. Can't get much simpler than that. Anyway, so having had this money thrown back at me and being left with this tool, I thought there's no way on earth I'm going to carry on using this and promote this guy, because I just thought this behaviour was astonishing, and I'm not going to put anyone else through that, and I'm certainly not going to reward it a second longer by showing now 15,000 subs this thing. So I sort of stopped using it, and then I thought, well, I've got to do this way, because I totally value the method, if you like. Oh, look what I've just done. I needed this off, and I've gone and pulled the whole thing off. So yeah, I needed to continue using the method. So I basically had a sort of look at the problem, and I thought, wait a minute, let's have a look. And I could see that I got a truss rod. I could see that what he'd invented was effectively a kind of truss rod in a sexy aluminum surround framework type of thing, and I thought that's cool. So I had a look at it and realised I could make one for nothing out of a truss rod. So I did a couple of experiments making one, and I pulled a truss rod out of a Squire Strat that I'd bought. Somebody tried to cut its head off. I've still got a picture of it somewhere in all my photos. It's almost cut completely through Squire neck. But I took the truss rod out of that, and that became my first truss rod. And I decided to call it the banana in mock tribute to the katana, because it rhymed, and it was bendy, so I thought that was a good enough name. And so I just set about using it, and I took the cue from the little 3 little feet that you saw me using, and the thing that I couldn't do that the tool did was the tool it's a kind of T-bar shaped thing, and it slips under the strings, and you don't have to push the strings out of the way like I did. But I figured out how to do that fairly easily with a little rubber spacer spreader, and actually found that was really far less of a hassle than I at first thought it might be, and just started using it and got some really great results straight away. And I carried on using it, and I carried on using it, and I carried on using it, and not once was anything about it ever made me consider going backwards to the other method. I sort of became one of those stories really that still makes me shake my head to this day. And I guess I've been in business for quite a long time, and I did say that to the guy. Said I didn't say this to him, but for all I know, he might have been the kind of guy who was a maker, a builder of things, a luthier, and not so cool or good at business. Fine, who is? But I'd been around business and done some business, and I kind of knew straight away that it wasn't a good way to treat the customer. But what I also saw was I began to realise what the fatal flaw, if you like, in the katana tool was. It was an elegant tool, good looking, did everything that what my banana does, of course, and didn't have to move the strings to one side. But the fact that somebody who couldn't use it could go and build their own for no money, versus $150 for the slightly sexy product with the capability of being able to put the thing over strings, not have to move the strings. It didn't seem to be such a great business idea if someone like me could just innovate, or improvise, improvise a working alternative for naught money. And you have to sort of think, well, would I want to put together a business that I would say to customers in the guitar world, the guitar luthiering world, hey, okay, you either buy this fabulous tool for $150, or if you don't want to buy it, well, you can make your own for nothing, actually. And it's really pretty good, with a tiny little inconvenience of having to move your strings around. But once you've got used to that, honestly, you won't even notice it, and it's really effective, and you'll never look back. If your success is based on hoping that I won't make my own, which is easy to do, then it's not. I wouldn't want to go into business like that. And if I was in the Dragon's Den as one of the investors, I certainly wouldn't put money into that. It's not a safe business idea. If anybody can improvise or innovate, improvise is the right word. Anyone can improvise, a working version out of bits of scrap. So I think he was on. To me, that would have been a risky thing. I wouldn't have wanted to stake my home on that. And I could, looking back on it, I could understand why he would have been probably quite frazzled and worried whether he was going to, make the money he felt he deserved. But the irony of it all, of course, is that it wasn't about the money for me. It was about, had I been treated with some respect, not even thanked. I didn't even expect to be thanked for promoting it. What I did expect was not to be abused for promoting it. But had I not been abused for promoting it, had it been just a good straight up experience, I would never have improvised my own. I was happy having paid the $130 I paid, because it was a great thing that did a great method, and I was happy with that method, as my videos at the time show. I'm raving about it. So it seemed to me so silly, because the only thing actually this guy had to get right in order to sell this was to get his treatment of his customers right, and then people like me would spend $130 instead of making our own. But what he did was he sort of pissed me off so badly that I went and made my own. So that seemed to me such a big flaw, and that really is a good example where if you lose sight of the fact that what somebody is buying really is the experience of it, more than they're even buying a tool, considering they can make their own in 5 minutes with a minimum of hassle, then you really should be paying attention to make sure that of all the things that's right, because the tool was right, there's nothing wrong with that, but the thing you should really make sure is right is the thing that keeps people feeling happy to pay the 150 quid, 130 quid or whatever I paid for something you could make in 10 minutes. Your success depends on the customer feeling good enough not to make their own. Anyway, so that was the long and winding road of how I got into doing it this way. Funny, eh? And so to this day, the tool is somewhere on a shelf out there. I don't need these, it's too thick. The tool is on a shelf out there somewhere, never used again. And every time I see it, it kind of brings a wry smile to my face, thinking. And I think if there was any revenge, and I think there was some revenge in a slight way, and that is that when I wrote my ebook, I had already decided that I was going to show how to make and use the banana, as I called it, as part of the ebook. And so, instead of loads of people being recommended to use his, I showed even more people how to make their own and avoid buying his. And I didn't do it primarily for that reason, but it's a sort of poetic justice in a way. And like I said, it would have been a completely different outcome had he just been civil, polite, friendly, and even the slightest bit grateful that I had celebrated and recommended his product. And I think in business, to have to even spell that out to somebody means they shouldn't be in business. Simple as that. If you need me to tell you that is what you should be doing, then you shouldn't be trying to sell a product. It's really, really mad. Anyway, so that, I wasn't intending to go into that story, but occasionally I sort of, I think, I always like to be, some people call this my method, they go, oh, you're brilliant, it's a brilliant method, you're a genius, and it's not my method at all. It's a method that I learned thanks to using this tool, put together, conceived of, invented, whatever you want to call it, by this guy who made the katana. And I still say it's a fabulous tool, but I will also say that never again will I pay 130 quid to be treated so shabbily. And that's the only thing I didn't like about it, was the person behind it and his behaviour. Funny that, isn't it? So there we are. That's why I do what I do. But the great thing about the banana tool, or that method, whichever, had I stayed using the katana, I would have probably, almost certainly have kind of developed the same kind of skills with it as I have done with the banana. But it's taken me 6 or 7 years to work out the two different kinds of, or to really get familiar with the two different kinds of fret buzz and fret slap, and to really learn what the truss rod, the banana, the katana, whatever you want to call it, what it's capable of telling me in terms of reading the condition of the neck and improving it so that you get a really lovely low action and get rid of the fret slap and so on. So, you know, that comes with time, and it, in a way, it doesn't bear. It's not related to which of the tools I was using. Anyway, I thought you might enjoy that little bit of historical, what do you call it, run around. Okay, I'm going to go off camera to do the sanding bit, and then I'll come back when that's done. See you in a minute. Okay, we are back and ready to restring. Oh no, we've got to put a bit of put some oil on the board. So frets are all polished out, guitar cleaned over. It's hard to make it look that much cleaner because it's all satin finished anyway, so it has a certain used look about it. So I'm just going to get some oil onto the board and then let it soak in for a minute and take off the excess, and then we'll restring, stretch the strings out and check the intonation and adjust if necessary. Okay, let's find the nut. Here it is. Sorry. Here we are. Nut in place. Right. So I'm going to restring and come down this end. With the restringing, I'm going to just take a quick look. I think we're a bit high up on this stop bar. People have different views on this. There's not much break angle, so I'm going to take it down to where I would prefer to have it. There are different opinions. Some people think that lowering the break angle gives you a different feel. Some people say wrapping the strings through the bridge and back up over through the stop bar and back up over the bridge, over the stop bar onto the bridge, again has a different feel. I'm not really convinced one way or to the other, but I sort of tend to go with the traditional way, which is to give it at least some break angle, because we know that the strings like break angle. They like to be pressing down on the bridge to make to be as solidly anchored as possible. That's the main thing. We're not trying to impart any vibrations through to the the resonating wooden top of the guitar or anything like that. We're trying to position some strings so that they produce as much, or they make as much resonate as well as they can, or oscillate as well as they can inside a magnetic field created by the pickups. So for that they really need to be fitted strongly, firmly. Now I'm just going to line up these tuners. The top one here is loose and it's trying to fall out because it's the wrong one. So I know Lee's going to get a new set, so I'm just going to put that one on first anyway. So when you restring, start with the and you're using an adjustable nut, start with the D and the G strings first and pull back a whole fret's worth, and then we start to tighten up. Hold the held string up, make it go over the loose string, and as the loose string comes around, bend the loose string up, and this time press down the held string and direct it under the loose string until it locks. Pardon me. So that's that. And then we go, oops, put that up on the saddle, on the roller, and then we do the same, but this time we jump across to the G, so you have to do things a bit in reverse that way. So what you can see there, oh, brilliant, just about. Okay, onto the roller. Pull it taut, pull it back 1 fret's worth, hold it down, start winding, keep the thumb holding the string taut until it's bent the loose bit around, and then hold the string up, send the loose bit under, now press down with the held string and guide the loose string up, and just make sure as it comes around the held string goes under the loose string. So over the loose string first time round, under the second time. And that makes its own little locking thing with a minimum, a workable minimum of string goes onto the posts. I keep losing my words. Okay, now I'm going to do the A. Again, pull back a fret's worth, wind, hold on, over the loose, round it goes, pull up the loose, held under the loose and into its slot. Make sure it's on its thing. Now this, sometimes when this happens, you come around and the end of the string is out of range to clip safely, so back up until you can clip it safely and then retighten. Thank you. E string through. I have to find some extra screws for the truss rod cover. Yes, one of these days I had this thought that I would put the katana up for sale and get another 100 quid back for it. I just thought that would be the ultimate in cruel payback to get even more money out of it. But I haven't, so I've left it where it is. Let's just double check these. Yep. So we're now on the B. Although it's tempting because it's, I don't know where it is at the moment. I can't remember where I've put it now, but it's yeah, a little devil tempts me to do that. Okay. Something is making something vibrate. It's quite interesting, whatever it is. So here we are. The great thing about putting this Tusq adjustable nut on is, before, when I played this at home over the last couple of days, the pinging from the plastic nut was unbelievable, and even just now when I tried to tune it before we did the sort of setup heights and so on, I wasn't even really trying to get it into tune because it just wouldn't. It was that much of a problem. So the beautiful thing when you put an adjustable Tusq nut on, how quickly it goes into tune, and it feels immediately like a different guitar, which is what I love about it. Okay, so these small plain strings tend to go around more than twice, but it's the same length of string each time I use as my rule of thumb. Okay, so we've got the strings on. Let's just look up. Strings are on, and then the first thing I do really is just gently kind of give them a bit of a pull here and there to make sure they're on, and take some of the immediate slack out of the whole thing. Somebody's doing something. Anyway, yeah, so now I'm going to look at the brake angle over here. That's okay, but it's lower than it was. Okay. I don't know who's here running some machine somewhere, but the first thing I'll do is tune up. So, tuned up, we'll double check the playing action, because it's possible that it's changed height along the way. Easy to turn these things when there's no bridge on them. Okay, just over 1.5, so I'm going to do a tiny fraction there, tiny fraction there. So the first thing I'm going to do now is stand it up and give it a pull. What we expect when we do this is for the strings to go out of tune. Get it back on its roller. We expect it to go out of tune because there's a lot of slack still in the system. And I've said this loads of times before, but I'll say it again. 1 second. The tuning stability on the guitar is down to two principal factors. The first one is the nut and the quality of the slots and the smoothness, the lack of friction in the slots. Get that right and that's half of the problem, half of the tuning stability equation sorted out. The other half is the slack in your strings, and too many people think that you can just put some strings on, give them a little bit of a pull and it's all good to go. It can seem like that, and if you do go off like that, I can promise you that the slack still in the strings will continue to kind of work its way out every time you play the guitar over months and months and months, and sometimes years. And every time you play it will go that little tiny bit out of tune. And people think it's the guitar that won't stay in tune, or they think it's the tuners that are a problem. It's not. It's the slack still coming out. So you have to wring it out by hand. And so long as it still goes out of tune, that's just the slack coming out. So the plain strings are almost there, but we have to keep going until there's no more detuning, or almost no more detuning. So we get hold of these thick strings again and we stretch them as much as we can up and down. And if you take the time to do that, you'll be repaid, particularly if, or only, but especially if you've taken care of the nut, which we've done here with a Tusq adjustable nut, which benefits from factory slots that don't have to be cut with a ragged file. It's made of Teflon, effectively, impregnated with PTFE, which is the slipperiest substance known to manufacturing. So untouched nut slots, PTFE, and set at the perfect height and the right width. Those things will make this nut stay in tune. So almost there. It's ridiculous how light that is to play now. It's almost impossibly light. So having said that, I set the guitars at the lowest possible playing action, and of course you can raise it at both ends if it's too light for you, but my start point is to set it as low as it can go to the leveling that I've given it. Practically in tune now. So that's the little bit on the E, but almost staying in tune. That's an unbelievably light guitar. So we're pretty much there, and what I would do next is to get me a tuner, and we want to check the intonation. Now thankfully let's check that this is not loose either. Yeah, it is a bit loose. We'll tighten that up. What I'm going to do here is just support that. So we're going to check the intonation. I always put it on the treble pickup, or the treble bridge pickup. That looks a bit sharp. Okay, well the first two are telling me a little bit sharp, so what I'm going to need to do is to bring that back. It probably makes things easier to slack off the strings a bit. Now when you slack the strings off, you're going to end up by pulling them back onto the posts, so it's going to cost a bit of time in re-stretching them out, but not too much. Now this is telling me it's too sharp, so I'm going to need to pull back the saddle a little bit. The nice thing about these thingy saddles, roller saddles, is that you have quite a lot of travel that you can make use of. The downside of them is they are a little bit stiff, if I remember, and they do feel a bit that way. So you can usually do it by a little bit by eye, because there is an expected pattern that these strings will go in. So I'm aiming to get them all close to where I think they should be first, and then we'll make any minor tweaks afterwards. Some of them are stiffer than others. You just have to kind of go with it and just do your best when you tighten it not to kind of tear at the slot. It's very difficult to get access. Now I also use that just to keep the jack off the bench, so it's not levering the socket. give it a little bit of a stretch on. Good. There we have it. Intonated. It's pretty good actually. It's interesting. We could probably go a little bit further on the A and the E, just for sort of visuals sake, but I think we're pretty much there. Too far. Right. There we have it. Right. Intonation done. Now we'll double check the we'll tighten up the jack socket, for which I've got the fabulous thingamy, what's it called? The StewMac tightening thing. So I put the device in, turn it backwards, and it locks and holds the inside of the jack socket in place, and then we can use the adjustable spanner, which is hard to get a bite on, but we can use the adjustable spanner to get a nice tight bite on it, and then we just have to turn this clockwise to loosen it off and undo it. So there we have it. Remaining thing, let's just double check the relief, because it's very flat. That's good. There's still a gap, but it's much flatter than it was, which contributes massively to the feel of the lowness down here. There's a few things that people seem to get wrong, misconceptions when it comes to the truss rod adjustment. The first one is that you should get used to adjusting your truss rod. It can't do you any harm at all. In fact, more importantly, you should do it because you'll need to adjust it throughout the year as temperatures and humidity changes, because the wood is organic in your neck, and sometimes it will flatten out a little bit, and because we're set up with such small tolerances, such small clearances, if the space disappears or it flattens out a little bit more, you'll find yourself with buzzes and things that you didn't have before. And to cure that, because the season is just changing the way the wood's sitting or changing it a little bit, you need to be prepared to make a small countering adjustment with your truss rod. And if you're too nervous to do it, then you'll be sort of just trapped and having to suffer the vicissitudes of the weather. So I do recommend that you develop the confidence to make those adjustments throughout the year should it require it. But if you think about it, it's the only thing that should change. The only thing that's likely to change is the curvature of the neck when the weather changes. So if you know that, if you're prepared for that, then you can make a tiny adjustment. So if it flattens out too much, because we've got it quite flat here, if later on in the winter or in your home, I'm talking to Lee now, if it straightens out a little bit more, you'll find that then it suddenly could be too flat, because we've got it very, very flat to start with. If it's suddenly too flat, you might find that the notes played down in the first half of the neck are choking out or buzzing. All you need to do is take your cover off. If the neck is too flat, you need to give it more, allow the strings to pull more curvature. So to do that, you will turn the truss rod counterclockwise, which slackens the rod a little bit and allows the strings to pull a little bit more curvature. And that's the way you control the curvature. That's all it's for. Don't reach for your truss rod as a means to adjust your playing action. The fact that the truss rod has an effect on the playing action is a secondary consequence of adjusting the truss rod. The primary reason for adjusting, or the reason why, or the purpose for adjusting the truss rod is to create more or less space for your strings to move in. If I've got nicely leveled frets like we've got here, then we can have a pretty flat relief curve. If, for example, the frets weren't so good, then we might have to have a bit more relief. And if you're a big hitter, you might have to have a bit more relief again. So there's different variables involved in it. But most important thing is, when people say how much relief do I need on this neck, the answer is not none. More than none, but not much more than none. So as little more than none as you can get away with. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because it makes sense to me. As little more than none as will play effectively on this guitar. Check it one more time. Pretty good. That is very extremely light. Okay, there we're done. That's it for tonight. A couple more little bits of tidying up, but then we'll be off home. I'm not going to plug it in and play it. Played it the other night. I know it's all working, and I'm not feeling terribly inspired. So that will be it for tonight. Okay, thanks for watching. See you soon with another. What have I got coming? I've got an ES335 coming, which hopefully will be as relatively good set of frets as this one. I've got a couple of custom builds to make, one for Nick in Arizona and one for Vince, and and a few more on their way in. So plenty to keep me busy. I've got three necks to make from scratch, which is exciting for me because it's the first time I've done it. So I'm going to make one for me first, which is my the one I'm allowed to make mistakes on, so I don't make mistakes on the ones for my customers. So that's the way I like to learn, is have a bit of leeway, so it's not all so precious that I can't make a mistake, but if I do make a mistake, it's on the one I'm going to keep, or it's on a test piece. So that way the pressure's off a little bit for me. Then I've got the two to make for the customer, and I've got a couple of fun guitars to make from lots of spare parts. So that's going to be the red Candy Apple Strat, which is been through a few incarnations already. Began as a blue guitar for JT, and eventually ended up being a hard-tailed body, which is going to turn into a upside down, or going to be mated to an upside down head neck. It's so low, it's just crazy. Alright, thanks for watching, see you soon.